Hello. Okay. Next tool on our agenda in the materials processing is going to be the bandsaw. Here it is. It's a jet 14-inch bandsaw. I'm going to tell you some of the parts. I just want to give you a little quick introduction. We have two of them. This one is covered because of social distancing. I can't have you use it, so I just have the bag over it so that we don't use it at all for now. In the future, hopefully, we can use both. For right now, 14-inch bandsaw. I'm going to show you all about it. It's called a 14-inch bandsaw because the blade is, in fact, a band. It runs all the way around in two wheels. This is the guide wheel for the top, and there's a matching wheel at the bottom. It's 14 inches because the diameter from here to here is 14. The blade on this one actually is 94.5 inches long. So there's one hanging over here. I can show you this without making you sick. This is what one of the belts looks, or the blades look like. Okay, it's very flexible. Okay, which allows us to make irregular shapes. Okay, so that's the whole idea behind the bandsaw is cutting something that's other than a straight line. We have more accurate saws to do that. But this one is for a little, not so much freehanding. You're going to cut two lines, but for something that's not straight, some irregular shapes that can be made. And we can only do that because the blade is quite flexible and thin, but it's got to be used correctly. This particular saw in the shop is, I said, jet 14-inch bandsaw. It is the slowest moving machine we have in the shop. Okay? And the reason I say that is because you can't make it cut faster by pushing harder. Okay? You have to be very, very patient with this machine. Just by pushing harder on a stock is not going to help you at all. It's only going to lead to a dangerous scenario, and we can't have that. Okay? So nice and slow, but this one's going to allow you to make all kinds of irregular shapes. Okay? So, okay, let's get into some of the parts. This piece right here, this is your blade guard. This covers the front of the blade. This knob right here is going to allow you to adjust the blade guard so you can push it up and down. The ideal scenario is that's just above the stock that you're cutting. So the distance between the work table and the bottom of the blade guard should be just above the thickness of your cutting so that you minimize the amount of blade that's showing. Okay, if you're cutting a half-inch piece of material and you have this thing set up like this, then you got a way too much blade showing here, and that also makes for a dangerous scenario. Okay, this plate here, this is your throat plate, and I'm pushing this up from down below. That is also your danger zone. Okay, that's a 3-inch diameter plate, so that means you can get your fingers within an 1.5 inches of that blade. Keep your hands off the throat plate. Okay, that's very, very important. These two things here, these are called cool blocks. They keep the blade running straight down through the table, right? Straight down through the throat plate. There's another set of these below the table, which you really don't need to see. And this is a roller bearing. Okay, this will spin when you start cutting because the action of the stock touching the blade is going to push the blade back, and then this will roll, and that keeps the blade from rolling off the back of the machine. There is absolutely nothing, zero, to keep the blade from coming off this way towards you, other than you being able to use the machine correctly. Okay, I'm going to say you something now that when you're cutting in a regular shape, whatever the curve may be, you make your cut. You don't ever back up. Okay, you start your cut, you run through your regular shape, whatever that shape might be, but do not back up because again, the blade only cuts on one side, cuts on this side. I don't know if you can see the teeth, they're on this side. There's nothing in the back that cuts. So if you're making a regular shape and you back up, the back of the blade is going to rub inside that saw kerf, and then it's going to move towards you and possibly pop off. Now, when it pops off, it's got to be reset, and inevitably the set goes out of the blade in that particular time because it rubs into the throat plate. So I'm going to say don't back up, but then later I'm going to contradict that. But anytime you're making an irregular shape, do not be easy for me to say, do not back up, okay? And this is your work table, okay? Just got a slot in it because we can use a miter gauge with this. Right now this is set up at 90 degrees right here so that we can cut, obviously 90 degrees, but irregular shapes, that's what this thing is really, really made for. Okay, so how does it work? First of all, what you're going to make sure you do when you come up to the machine is make sure the blade guard's set at the right height. So you're going to take your stock, you're going to put it behind the blade, you're going to loosen this knob up here, and you're going to push down on it. When it touches the stock, you're gonna lift it up a little bit, and then you're gonna tighten this. Okay? That's your job. My job is to take care of the rest. I check to make sure the blade's tight. I tend to make sure the cool block's working, the roller bearings and everything are working right, so that the blade's gonna stay where it is. That's my job. Your job is to make sure that there's very little of the blade exposed here, so you minimize the chances of your fingers getting in it. The other thing you're gonna do is never cut right in front of the blade. Okay? Keep your hands out to the sides, never right in front of the blade. Okay? That's very important. This machine is ideal for making irregular shapes. I'm going to cut this irregular shape on here. And it's really a matter of eye-hand coordination, guiding the blade along the line that you've made while you're turning the blade around, while you're turning the stock around the blade. You can make straight cuts on this. We could attach a fence here, a certain distance from the blade, and we can make straight cuts. They won't be as accurate as they would be with a table saw, but you can do that. Now, if we had a bunch of small pieces we can certainly make them here. Like I said, if you have pieces you're going to cut that are not less than 9 inches, or your hands are going to be closer to the blade on the sliding compound miter saw, you come here because it's safer. You just have to remember that it works very, very slow. So what you're going to do is you're going to stand here. The on-off switch is over here. Green turns it on, red turns it off. It's designed that way so you can have 2 hands on the stock when you're cutting, so you don't have to hold any triggers, you just pull the trigger. Okay? So you turn it on. You won't be able to hear me, so I'm going to make the cut and then I'll come back. You turn it on, it's going to run. Line up your blade to the stock, and as you're pushing forward, you move the stock around the blade. The stock always has to be moving away from you in order for it to cut. The moment you stop that, but you're still moving the piece, all you're doing is fatiguing the blade, because now the blade's going to corkscrew inside that saw curve and generate heat, and then wear the blade out and possibly break it. Okay? It's not a continuous, it is a continuous band, but at some point it's welded together. So if that gets hot, it could snap and break, and they do break quite often. Unfortunately, not quite often, but they do break once in a while. Okay? So here's how it works. Okay, here's how it works. Your stock is flat against the table. Your hands are always going to be back here, and you want 2 hands on the stock at all times. You turn it on, start the blade in, and as it's moving forward, I'm going to now move it around the blade, not putting my hands in front of the blade, and I have 2 hands on the stock at all times. Nice and slow. All the cutting action is on this side. Right? There's nothing happening on the back side of the blade. There's no cutting back there. Okay, always make sure you have 2 hands on the stock. So now what I did, and here's the outcome of my previous cut. Okay? Not right on the line, but it's close enough. Because you always cut to a line. Don't freehand here. We always have to have a line to cut through. So now what I'm going to do is show you when you can back up. Now let's say I'm going to cut this. That should look familiar to you. Okay, that should look familiar to you. This is the pattern we're doing for our little shelves. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to make a relief cut. My relief cut, you don't have to use a pencil. I'm just throwing this into you. So my relief cut's going to be right here. Okay, and that's the only time you cut where you back up. I'm going to show you one. You won't be able to hear me again, but I'm going to show you one. So you cut, straight in, straight back. Straight back. And what that does, by cutting straight in and straight back, minimizes you catching the blade inside some irregular cut and then pulling the blade off this way, because there is no safety for that. The blade will come off on you. Okay, so that's a relief cut. That's the only time you cut, you back up. Okay, and I can make relief cuts all day long. I could shape this whole edge with relief cuts. It's just one straight cut after another. Let me show you a couple more. Straight in, straight back. Right, there they are, a bunch of relief cuts. Now what's going to happen when I cut along this line and I get to that, when I get to this point, that piece is going to fall away. When I get to the next cut, the next piece will fall away. And then here is my most important one, because I can make this cut, this radius with this belt, but I need to have it fall away so it doesn't back up. So here we go. I line it up. Follow my line. All right, first relief cut, that piece fell away. All right, my next relief cut, the next piece falls away. Then I finished my one side of my pattern and I didn't have to back up once inside in a regular shape. Right? Very, very important. Don't back up. Now all these pieces are sitting here. I'm going to keep my work surface clean. I'm going to pick all these up and throw them in the garbage so that there's nothing clogging my work surface. Now, to cut this side, I will not need a relief cut because when I get here, this piece will fall away. Okay? So again, very, very important. You keep both hands on the stock. Never work in front of the blade, nice and slow, and the only time you back up is when you're making relief cuts. Now, the depth of the radius of the circle you can cut is somewhat defined by the depth of the blade, but you can make tighter turns by making more and more relief cuts. And I'll cover that when I see you in class, okay? So, safety first, my sleeves are rolled up, I have my safety glasses on. See, safety glasses on. And there's nothing hanging over the machine, and I keep 2 hands on the stock. And I always turn it off when I'm done, okay? Keep your work surface clean. And always make sure that one of the most important things is to make sure you're just the height so that you're as close, the safety guard is as close to the stock as you can get it and still be able to work without binding, okay? See you soon.